Hello. Today I would like to create another shader component using GhGL and Grasshopper, which is a great function I'm playing around with recently. The shader that I'm gonna build today is a Fresnel shader, which looks like this. The original geometry without the shader looks like this kind of shape, like a gummy stuff procedurally or parametrically can be changed like this. And then using the Fresnel shader, you will have the outline of the shape be growed and the center of the shape will be transparent like this. And it's one of the basic shader as well, I think, along with the Toon shader and the Madcap shader. And the coding will be pretty easy. So let me build up with you guys. Right, so I'll make a new file to build from scratch. I'm gonna just create a simple shape from the sphere, mesh sphere. I guess it could also be work with the VREP, but it's much easier to transform the vertices, so I'm gonna deal with the meshes and raise up the UMV to make it a bit smoother, and then set the radius to like any radius you want, doesn't really matter. And in order to deform this mesh geometry, I'm gonna extract the vertices first. Then let's say I want to move the downside and the top side in a different scale using the scale uniform. So I am going to first deconstruct the point, then first minimize the z by a value 0. Oops, not 0, which will give you the range from -50 to 0, which is this part. So the maximum will be 0 in this case, I guess. Yeah. So for this one, I am going to connect a remap together with the bounds, and then construct the domain. So in this case, the range will be -50 to 0, and the -50, I want to be able to control the scale for the -50 part, but don't change the one that's on the middle. So which will be, the domain will be, the target will be 1.0 for the maximum domain, and for the I want it to be able to control it using the sliders, maybe from 0 to 2, something like that, so that you can shrink or scale. Okay, so that's for the bottom part. Let's also create the scale for the top part. So for that one, I am gonna use the maximum with the 0 for a z coordinate. Then for this one, the maximum is 50, minimum is 0, so I'll make another remap here. In this case, I'm also going to create the domain, construct domain here. In this case, the 0 should be a scale 1, and the value 50 for the z value should be parametrically changeable. So let's just copy this sliders here and then connect it to the B, and for the A just connect this one as a so that you don't want to change the middle part. Now I think I'm ready to have two values here for the bottom and top part. What I am going to do now is just multiply these two values and use a scale uniform to, oops, not here, to the Z, and then scale this vertices like this. Okay, let's hide those. And if I change those values here, you can see that you can control the bottom and top part separately. Alright, that looks good. And then since you have to reconstruct the mesh out of these vertices, I'm just gonna use the construct mesh. Right, using the vertices plus a face information here, and that's it. So this is the geometry that I'm gonna use to apply a shader. Now let's start making a Fresnel shader. So since I'm using the GhGL again, like the last time for like matcap shader and the outline shader or the toon shader, you need to install the plugin or plugin for the Rhino WIP or Rhino 7, which is called GhGL from the package manager. So if you open a package manager, you will be able to search for the plugin called GhGL, which enables you to use create a shader component using GLSL, OpenGL. So this one, GhGL. So the current version I'm using is 7.0.4. Right, and once you install it and restart your Rhino, I think you'll be able to search for the component called GL Mesh Shader. So this is the one that I'm gonna use in order to create a custom mesh shader. Right, now let's first create some parameters that I'm gonna use for this Fresnel shader. I'm gonna create 4 parameters. One is a Fresnel, the color for the Fresnel. So I'm just gonna name this Fresnel underscore col. And for the second one, I am going to create a ambient color, which is gonna be used as a highlight of the Fresnel. So that's gonna be drawn just outside of Fresnel edges. And for this third one, I'm gonna create a parameter called Fresnel power, how much edge you will get with the Fresnel shader. And last of all, ambient scale, like how big, how far you can see the ambient light or ambient color. And ambient scale with the underscore in between ambient and scale. Okay. So that's gonna be the 4 parameters that I wanna use. Let's input some parameters here using 2 color swatch for a Fresnel color and the ambient color. Okay, I'm just gonna change the Fresnel to something red, maybe to ambient to something blue, and I have just found out that there's some spell mistakes. So ambient color. Okay, anything else? Right, so the Fresnel power and ambient scale doesn't really have to have a maximum value, but I'm just gonna connect the value from 0 to 10 for both of them. I can just change it later on. Right. So M stands for the mesh and everything else is good. So let's start writing some code. So before getting into this, let me explain the basic algorithm in order to create a Fresnel shader. It's pretty much the same as the last toon shader outline, create an outline. So say you have this geometry, and say you have a camera somewhere around here, and what you want to do is to create a kind of a grow edge on the edge of the sphere, and the center of the sphere, center of this geometry, I want it to make it see-through, like transparent. So in order to get the edge from the camera view, what you can do is to get the camera direction to the vertices for each vertices in the mesh, and then at that vertices get the normal direction of the mesh. And if the dot product of the camera view together with the normal direction of the mesh is close to the perpendicular, then that means that the point that the camera is looking at is pretty close to the edge of the geometry. If the camera is looking at this kind of vertices and on the center, then the normal might be like looking totally parallel to the camera direction. In this case, the dot product is equal to close to -1. Then in that case, I want to make the shade to be transparent. So only the edge of the geometry, which the dot product is close to 0, which means close to perpendicular, I want to make it grow, or not transparent, translucent, but make the center to be transparent. So that's the basic rule here. So in order to calculate that kind of dot product, you need to have your camera direction calculated, and that's not that hard to do. I mean, it's pretty much the same as what we did last time for the toon shader. What you need to have is first go to the insert built-in uniform, and there's a global uniform called camera location, so get that. And from this camera location to the mesh vertex, you'll be able to get the camera direction. So I am going to name that, and also I want to pass it to the fragment shader, so I'm gonna name it out vec3 camera direction. And this camera direction is normalized of to the mesh vertex minus camera location. So this is actually the eye direction, the camera direction, which you are looking at each mesh vertices. So that's pretty much it for the vertex shader. So go to the fragment shader to write the Fresnel shading part. And there are stuff that I don't really need here, so I'm gonna comment these out later on. First, I have these 4 parameters here, so let's register those first. So underneath the uniform math3 vol2 camera normal, I'm going to create 4 parameters. First, uniform vec4 stands for the color, named as Fresnel cal, the same name as I put it here. Also uniform. This is vector 4 because it's combination of RGB and A with alpha. Ambient call for the second input. Okay, so mistake. Right, and to float value, which is Fresnel power and ambient scale. So uniform float Fresnel power and uniform float ambient scale. Right, now let's go to here and disable some of the stuff that I don't need. First of all, I am not using light information, so I'm gonna disable this, and also I'm not going to use the camera normal, so disable this as well. Intensity, I don't need those as well. Diffuse, no. Ambient, nope. Color, nope. So almost everything being commented out. And for the the final value, in order to replace the fragment color, I'm just gonna set some example value here, just to start with the simple value. And this is not set, this is vector 3. So right now I just have really a white value here, and I'm gonna just delete those. And the first thing I would like to do is to calculate the dot product between the camera direction and the normal of the mesh vertices. Okay, so I can do that with before doing that, I have to import the camera direction here to the fragment shader. So underneath the out or underneath the normal, I'm gonna write in vec 3 camera direction. So now the camera direction being linked from vertex shader to the fragment shader. Now that I have information in order to calculate the dot product, that is normal and the camera direction, let's calculate that. Dot product float dot value equals to a dot camera direction and normal. Now the result should be a range between -1 to 1. So if I just replace this fragment color here with the dot value, it should be something really black here, because if you're looking from the camera view and the normal is facing to the camera, so the dot product is always gonna be a negative value. So that's not really what I want. So I am going to make an absolute value so that even if it's the negative value, it will become positive. Now I have some value here that will be the real base for the Fresnel. But currently it is not transparent on the center, but it's all matte colored yet still. So what I want to do is that use some threshold to use those value on the center, which is currently white, to be used as a transparency value. So in this case, more white, more transparent, more black, more solid. Right, so let's calculate that using a, well, in this case, in shader, the white means is close to 1, so it means if you want to use it to the alpha channel, it will become opaque, and if it's black, then it will become transparent. So you have to kind of reverse the value, so make the black part white and the white part black. And that's pretty easy to do. You just have to subtract dot value by 1 like this. Okay, so that looks good. Now if I copy this value to a alpha channel here on the last value here, I can already see that the center part is become transparent, and the outer part become translucent. Right. Now what I want to do next is to use this Fresnel power to control how like translucent you want to make the edge to be. So I am going to name this Fresnel value as Fresnel val equal to, I'm going to use the power function here, power, and this is the basic value that I want to change, 1 minus dot value, which I'm using here, with the Fresnel power. Now by doing that, and let's make this a single color for the base color, like a white, and then replace this 1 minus dot value with this Fresnel value, and let's see how it looks like. Right now it's all white, but if I change this value here, you can see that the less power value you have, more opaque for whole geometry become, and higher greater value you give for Fresnel power, you have a thin outline as opaque, as a translucent shaded, and the center will be more transparent. Right. So that's good. So that's pretty much it for Fresnel shader, but I want to add one more value here, which is this ambient color. Before that, I also would like to make this white Fresnel into using this Fresnel color here. So that's not that hard to do. This is the Fresnel color here, so just replace this vec3 with Fresnel col.xyz. Now it become red. So if I change the color here, the color of the Fresnel will follow with these value. Now one more thing I would like to implement is to give a highlight to the outside of this Fresnel color. Well, this itself looks okay, but I would like to add another shade, another highlight to this Fresnel shader, like make it lighter than the basic Fresnel color to make the outlook a bit more rich. So, and in this case, I'm gonna call this as an ambient. So in order to create an ambient, I am going to just copy this Fresnel value here, and since I want to make the ambient just outside the Fresnel, just outside the edge of the Fresnel, so I want to make it a bit more thinner than the Fresnel. So in order to do that, you have to give a greater value for this Fresnel power. So what I'm going to do is to just multiply this with the ambient scale. So in this case, if the ambient scale is more than 1, then you're being promised to have more thin layer of the layer for the ambient, for the highlight. And let's rename this as an ambient value. Right now, the thing here is that now that I have two value, Fresnel value and the ambient value, I want to mix those two value together to create a mixed color. So what I can do, I'll create a vector 3 named color, and I'm going to use a mix function. First, provide a ambient color XYZ, which I have inputted from here, which is this one, and then mixed it with the Fresnel color, Fresnel color dot XYZ, and then use this ambient value to actually mix those two colors. So I'm gonna give 1.0 minus ambient value here, right? Then finally, now that I have a color that has been mixed together with this one and this one using the ambient value here, I'm just gonna replace this color here, vector 3 color here, with the one that I have just made, and press OK and see how it's gonna look like by changing the value here. And you can see that if I increase the value for the ambient scale, you can see that the outside highlight, which is currently white, become thinner and thinner, and if I make it less value smaller, then you have more blurred highlight to the base Fresnel. And that's pretty much it for the Fresnel. I think it was pretty easy, and just try changing the color here, maybe the highlight to the other color as well, like blue or yellow. Oh, that looks good. That looks pretty. Right. So this is also pretty easy to implement, but it gives you an interesting outlook to the geometry, which is pretty interesting to do it in Grasshopper. And if I change the geometry like this, see some interesting effects here. Yeah, so that's about it, how you can create a Fresnel shader. I hope you find it interesting. You can download a file from the video description, even though this is pretty easy to follow, right? So thank you very much. I'm gonna try to play with this GhGL, which is really great, really interesting. I hope you find it interesting as well. Okay, goodbye.